Debate. Okay, my name is Liam McManus. I'm the founder of Big Debates. And in all the previous Big Debates, I have been the moderator. But today, I'm going to be frontline debating. I'm going to hand over to Will. I'll introduce you in a moment to moderate. So first, I was going to ask the room, who is here for the first time? Who's at their first Big Debate? Just under 50%, alright? You're all very welcome. And who is here for the second, third, fourth time? Our regular crew. Alright? Great stuff. Okay. So, I will stop talking very soon. There are the bars at the back where you can grab drinks, food. And Matt, can I ask you to close the door for you? The other door. Okay, so we'll introduce the format, the debate format. Yes, and he will moderate the debate, he'll moderate me, he'll moderate all the frontliners, he'll moderate you guys without hitting anybody. So Will is British, he's been with Big Debates from the start. Give a round of applause for Will, our Big Spanking Debate moderator.
Thank you very much, thank you Liam. Okay, we're competing against a guitarist today, so we have to speak quite loudly. Ian's still doing something. Yeah, we've just got a few people coming in, so then we'll close the door. We have one microphone at the front for the one-man debaters and myself. Ian, who's just helping people come in at the moment, he'll be roaming with a microphone. So guys at the back, if you can't project your voice too much, there will be a microphone going around waving at Ian and he'll come and help you. Okay? So, yeah. Actually, Ian, give us a wave.
Hello everyone, if you need a microphone, just show your hands to me, okay?
Exactly, like the man said. Okay, so a lot of you are new. What I'm going to do is run you through the format of the debate today. Okay, so obviously you can see at the top there, pitting your children is acceptable. That is the motion of the debate. Okay, so what we're going to do at one moment is we're going to vote. But first of all, have you all added Liam on WeChat? Okay, have you all got him? You all promise you've got Liam on WeChat? I promise you are allowed to delete him. The moment you leave the Camel, you're allowed to delete him, and you never have to see his little face again. But during the debate, you must have Liam's WeChat. Sorry, but that's part of the process. Alright, so, the format of the debate. You will first of all send your vote, whether you are for, against, or undecided about the motion. Okay, and you'll send that vote via WeChat. Not yet. Hold on, I'll tell you what to do. Okay? There will then be opening statements from the against side and from the for side. They will each have 4 minutes each. Uninterrupted. No heckling at that stage, please. Okay? Uninterrupted. The two sides will then, after they've all had a chance to speak, they will then have a chance to oppose something that the other side has said, or a rebuttal session. And then we open it up. That's when you guys get involved. That's when everyone can all participate, okay? So the front line will still be talking, of course, but you guys put your hands up and I'll try and get as much of you involved as possible, okay? If I don't see your hand first time, keep it up, I will come to you. It's my job to make sure that as many of you guys talk as possible, and then just keep the debate flowing, alright? And then, at the end, we'll do a final vote. You'll then have to send find Liam's little face and send him a message again. Okay? And then we will count the closing votes. The winning team will be the one who changes the most votes. Okay? It's all about the change of votes. Alright? All clear so far? So, this is the moment, everyone. Get out your phones, please. Open up WeChat for me. Get out your phones, guys. Find Liam and send him a message either saying for, against, or undecided. Remember, the motion is hitting your children is acceptable. Are you for the motion? Are you against the motion? or are you undecided? Okay? I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Yes, I can try with them on WeChat. Anyone not sent a message? Are we waiting for anyone? Are we ready? Okay then, so we did a coin toss before, and against side one, and they decided the four side should begin the debate. Okay, so without further ado, this is Robin Smith. Robin is an English father. That's thanks. Robin? Oh yes, actually, sorry, hold on, you are ready. One thing I did forget, small for the front liners, guys, we do have a bell. What will happen is, when you have 30 seconds left, I'll ring the bell and you've got another 30 seconds. Okay? That's not the end, that's 30 seconds left. Okay?
Hello, good evening. So, the case for spanking. When is spanking objectively bad? It's bad when done too often. Any punishment taken to excess in frequency is subject to diminishing returns. Should a punishment become regular in frequency, then the child has less to lose by misbehaving. The same principle governs spanking and other punishments, and the child who is punished too often will not gain, but will rather start losing from the experience. This principle implies that all punishments, especially the more severe ones, like spanking, ought to be infrequent to rare. It's bad when it becomes too severe. Over-severe punishments can do far more harm than good. We wouldn't want children growing up thinking the only way to learn lessons is by experiencing staggeringly great loss. It's bad when influenced by anger. And here are several reasons why. One, anger can be a distraction, which can weaken the main points of the lesson. Two, anger is no great benefit to the undeveloped mind, and as part of the learning process, while it may often do a great deal of harm, already missed. Three, how bad parents feel about a misdemeanor may be at odds with the objectively clear amount of punishment that is needed. In other words, our anger may influence us to punish a child either too little or too much, when instead we should be considering which punishment is the most suitable. This applies to all punishments. So when is spanking good? I'm going to speed up a little bit. As we grow and explore the world, we learn physically painful lessons. We learn to keep away from fire, to avoid things that sting us, and to slow down around objects that we might run into and suffer hurt. These lessons are invaluable, part of everyone's growing up, and save us from a great deal of further pain while fostering a healthy amount of fear and respect for the laws of nature. Spanking is similarly effective when it follows the same patterns as these lessons from nature's classroom. At times it can be even more effective because considerate parents have the chance to warn their children of the consequences of misbehavior in advance. Pain as a punishment can be preferable to other types of correction when considering situations that represent a great deal of danger. We may associate the instinctive reaction of pain with a misdemeanor, just like the retraction experience when we touch something that burns, in order to teach a lesson that will save the child from learning the harder way. And a final point for this intro, I believe that corporal punishment can serve as a reminder that a parent is the final authority when it comes to misbehavior. As nature's laws exact absolute obedience, so must the parent exact the same with their rules. The final restriction to wrong action is physical force. And therefore, I argue that all parents ought to consider keeping this indispensable and hopefully less used tool in their disciplinary repertoire in order to retain every measure with which to firmly establish the correct principles in their treasured children. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And I will ask the audience, if you're not happy with the statement, please don't throw your drinks at them. It's not very good. Okay. Next up is Barry. Okay. Barry is an early childhood educator and believes that when it comes to learning and behaviour, B.F. Skinner's behaviourism is as true as anything in psychology.
Children are people. Hitting people is wrong. Therefore, hitting children is wrong. That is the core of my argument, and if I stopped there, that would be fine. If you hit children, they suffer. And it is a punishment that is unnecessary. If you want to change children's behavior, you can use the naughty check. Children do not need to suffer physical punishment. They do not need to be slapped. They do not need to be hit in order for you to change their behavior. The other gentleman had a number of points. Hitting people is objectively bad. I agree. I think that we shouldn't hit people, particularly children. Apparently, hitting children has diminishing returns. And you know what? I agree. I think we should not hit children at all. There are other methods of punishment, other ways of diminishing the frequency of undesired behavior that we can use. Like saying you don't get any ice cream, or saying you can't have that book that you want to read, or no video games today. Now, punishment can be used in excess, like hitting children. Any punishment can be used in excess, but one time is too many times to hit a child. They are smaller than you, they are weaker than you, they do not know as much about the world as you, and they look up to you. And you are teaching them the lesson that hitting people is okay, that it is a good way to get what you want. This is not a lesson that we should teach children, if we can possibly avoid it. Also, if you think of hitting children as something that is acceptable to do, you will more than likely do it in anger. If you are really, really frustrated, if you have had a long, long day, if everything is going wrong, and then your child annoys you, maybe you'll hit them if you think it's okay. And you would not have done it if you were thinking about it, if you were in your right mind, if you were not very, very angry. That is not how you should discipline children. You should not discipline them out of anger. You should think about it, consider it, and then do it. Not go, oh my God, and then hit them. You should be in control. You should be teaching them a lesson about how adults act. You should be teaching them a lesson about what they should do. And you should explain it. And you should model good behavior. You should be the lesson that you want them to emulate. You should say it and do it. If you just say how they should act, and you do not act in line with your principles, then they can see. They'll know that you're a fraud. Look, hitting people is wrong. Children are people. Don't hit children. If you want them to not to do something, you can say, don't do it. You can explain why not to do it. You can tell them there will be consequences for doing it again, and then you can make sure that those consequences actually happen. You do not have to hit children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. Okay, next up, for the four sides, is Liam McManus. Grew up in a home that used the wooden spoon.
It's funny, isn't it? Okay, so I grew up in a home that used the wooden spoon. So I'm going to start off by telling everyone a story. And the villain of this story is me, at 3 years old. And the hero is my mother with her wooden spoon. So, I was 3 years old, and my brother, who was also here somewhere today, he was 2 years old, I was 3 years old, and you know, siblings aren't always nice to each other, right? And I gave him a bottle of bleach Bleach is like washing liquid. I knew this was not allowed. I knew it was bad, and I gave it to him and told him to drink it. I wanted to hurt him. Kids aren't born as angels. I wanted to hurt my brother. I was probably jealous of him. The first thing I did, actually, going off topic, when he was born and my mum brought him home for the first time, when I saw him, I burst into tears and cried. Because he was taking my parents' attention away from me. This is how kids work. We're not angels. So I probably tried to kill him or hurt him with this bleach. Luckily, he's still here today. He said no to the bleach, and my mother discovered, took me into the kitchen, pulled my trousers down, got the wooden spoon out and said, Liam, and explained what I did wrong. What you just did was wrong. You are trying to hurt Brendan. You know that you shouldn't be drinking this bleach. You know it's dangerous. I'm going to spank you now. I was scared. I cried. She spanked me. It hurt. I cried more. And I learned right from wrong. I learned that harming my little brother, trying to, was a bad thing. So that's the story. So that's just an example of how spanking can work and how it's impacted me positively. Okay, and what I want to persuade everyone in this room of today is that the majority of parents on planet Earth use the tool of spanking just the same way as my parents use it and Robin uses it. Anyone in this room that uses it can use it. Use it in a controlled way as an effective tool. The problem is, and the reason why all maybe 60+% of you came into this and voted, I'm sure, voted against the motion, is because we're exposed to the problems, to the bad news, the bad side of spanking, where parents use spanking in an unacceptable way. So where parents do very violent things, abuse their children, and they're the stories that we click on WeChat and read, right? Who's going to read a story about Robin disciplining his daughter and her turning out fine? It's a boring news story. No one reads it. No one prints it. But we do go to those stories about parents that really hurt their kids and those abuse stories. And so that's all we think about when we think about the topic of spanking. But it is my contention today that they are the minority, the tiny minority of parents who use spanking, use it in an abusive way. And even in that case, the fact that a tool is used in an unacceptable way does not make that tool unacceptable, it makes the usage of that tool unacceptable. So I'll compare this to the use of alcohol, the use of cars. Cars get the majority of people from A to B, they're good tools, but some people get drunk and drive a car into someone else and kill them. That is an unacceptable use of the tool that is a car. It is not, the car is not unacceptable. It is the person that used it in an unacceptable way. Same with alcohol. So that's my contention. And actually, when a society says, actually, spanking is acceptable, that is where you help people get better at spanking and use it in a better and more effective ways, rather than pushing it underground and saying that no one can use it and making it illegal and unacceptable. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Liam. Next up is Keith Williams, also known as K-Star. He grew up in a home that used corporal punishment and has spent years training teachers to be effective disciplinarians. He also studied child psychology and development in university.
Thank you. It's good to be up here again. But last, it always makes me a little bit nervous. So. It was good to listen to everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm looking at notes. I gotta look at the outline. So I want to start off with a question of why parents discipline. So there's a couple answers. One is because their kids are doing something right now that we don't want them to do, so we discipline them. So a short-term goal. And we have a long-term goal where we want to change their behavior so they become good citizens of the world, hopefully. So those are the two reasons or the two goals we have in discipline. Now there are many ways to discipline kids. Hitting them is only one of the ways. So as I was introduced, as Will said, I grew up in a home of corporal punishment. I also went to a Baptist school when I was a kid in the US where we'd be hit with wooden spoons. My mother liked using the wooden spoon. It's not quite as dramatic tale as Liam told you, but I get hit with the wooden spoon quite a bit. I gotta be careful how many things I say about this because my parents will watch this on YouTube, so trust me, there's lots of incidents. I don't want to get into trouble. So there's two goals that go with it. I have quite a bit of experience with it. And my own personal experience would be that it was a horrible experience and it didn't work. And that's what I try to relate to people. When I train teachers, I don't train parents, I wish I could. That's what I try to relate to them. Basically, it's a bad idea to use it. Now, going back to those two goals, why is it a bad idea? One is, for short-term goals, using physical punishment with children is no more effective than using other forms of discipline. Okay? So, using a happy seat, or times out, or removing them from the situation. So, in laboratory studies in the 80s, before it was illegal to do, they actually brought parents in to laboratories in the United States, and they had some parents hit their children when they did something wrong. They had other parents use a quiet zone or safety seat. And the results of the research for short-term compliance was that there was no difference. So in other words, the parents that were hitting their kids were just hitting their kids. There was no difference in the compliance if they hit them or not. So it's not really a useful tool. Long-term research shows that the more you beat kids and the longer you do it, or hit them or spank them or whatever, paddle them or whatever euphemism you want to use for violence, the longer you do it, the more often you do it, the less compliance you get. So the more you hit your kids, the more they're going to misbehave. So in that result, it's actually a very poor thing to do. If you want your kids to be poorly behaved children, hit them. If you don't, they'll be better behaved. So long term, there's less compliance with good behavior. Now, what are the effects on kids? There are several effects on kids. Children that are experience physical abuse, they experience anxiety, depression to a greater extent. And these things, when they're children and when it's happening, they feel a greater distance from their parents. They feel estranged from their parents. These are all horrible feelings for children. So when parents have their children, they're making their children feel really, really bad. But there's longer term effects. As children grow up, they learn a couple lessons that would be better if they didn't learn. One, that loving relationships involve violence. So they carry that. They've learned that lesson. If someone loves you, they hit you. So if I love someone, I can hit them. They also learn the lesson that bigger people can exert control over smaller people through the use of physical force. So they carry that on in life. And when they grow up, they're much more antisocial and prone to aggressiveness, violence, also things like drug abuse, alcohol abuse. So there's lots of negative long-term goals from doing it with children. So I don't want to get too dark on you. There are many things we can do with SCAD. There are 3 styles of parenting. We can employ permissive parenting, which is let your kid do whatever he wants. That's not a good choice. Authoritarian parenting, which is hit your children, make sure they obey, because obeying is the important thing, not the lesson. Or authoritative parenting, where we want children to learn why doing good things is good, why it's good to behave in a certain way, what are the benefits to it. So parents that explain things to children and explain to them why they must behave in a certain way. My time's up. Thank you.
Okay guys, so that was the opening statements. What I want to quickly say before we move on, which I did mention before, is that in the closing statements, there will only be one person from each side, and there will also be one member of the audience who can come up and have a 2-minute statement from each side as well. So 2 minutes for one person from the frontliners, and 2 minutes from one person each side from the audience. Okay, just that'll be at the end. We'll have time to think about it before we get up. Okay, so first of all, the 4 side. Is there anything that you want to particularly challenge in what these guys said? Thanks.
Barry, hi. You were saying that hitting any human is wrong, and children are small humans, right? Do you think the military is wrong?
Honestly, yes, but I can see why it happens. But you know what? I have taught some children who are really quite disruptive, and I've never had to hit any of them.
Fair enough. Would you be able to give a superior solution to wars, basically?
I think that if you're comparing a small child to a war, somebody somewhere needs to call the police.
All right, and you were saying that when anger controls you, you're more likely to hit in anger, right?
Absolutely.
So what's stopping you hitting them, even if that's not your normal policy? If anger is controlling?
People do things out of force of habit. I am saying that hitting children is so very, very, very rarely a good idea that you should not think of it as an acceptable thing to do. If a child is running towards another child with a knife, then maybe you should push them out of the way. But children doing things where you should hit them happens so rarely. You should only do it as the absolute last thing possible. You should not think of it as something that falls within your parental repertoire of things I can do for discipline.
That sounds like you agree with me, except I may be slightly more lenient maybe with that. Okay, and you were saying that any amount of hitting is bad, because hitting, any adult or any other age group is bad, right? So why is hitting children not bad? Well, I would argue that that's not really, that's a non sequitur, because water is good for you, but in excess is bad too. I mean, it doesn't necessarily follow, right? My point really behind it all is that children have different developmental stages which allows them to be influenced in different ways. A small child being unable to understand some abstract principles and concepts will understand a tiny amount of pain which sets them on the right track, giving them, don't go here, or don't do that. Quick little association with that, and it helps them quite a lot. Okay, thanks.
Dave, is there anything you want to add from your side? Guys, is there anything you want to address from what I said?
I do.
Of course, please.
Chris Robin. So you had some good points, diminishing returns, the more often you do it, stuff like that. But you mentioned that, okay, hitting your kid's not bad, but it's bad when it becomes too severe. The problem in that is, where do you limit what is too severe? So we got a guy in the picture, and he's slapping with an open hand, he's slapping his child, and someone might look at that and say it's not severe. Or someone else, like maybe my mother would be like, or my dad would be like, maybe you should grab the belt and whip him with the belt, and that's not severe. Maybe somebody else, you should close fist punch to the head, and that's not severe. It's hard to draw a line, and it's hard to control what is permitted in society. It's very hard to control what parents do in the privacy of their own home.
Is that a question?
Your definition of what's too severe, it's great that you have a definition of it, but that's not shared and it's permissible in society. So I'm just making a critique. It's not actually a question. It's bad when it's influenced by anger. I wonder how many people here would actually hit someone if they weren't angry. How do you hit when you're not angry? That's a question for you. How do you hit someone if you feel happy?
It's an educated, controlled, planned.
You feel good when you do it.
I feel good.
So, you feel what?
Not like that.
No, but you feel what?
You feel bad that they're in pain.
You feel bad that they're in pain.
But it's a bad thing. It's when your child misbehaves seriously, there are no awesome options. You have to choose an option that is going to be uncomfortable for the greater good.
That's a justification.
That is.
So, yeah, I want to mention that. And for Liam, you have a story about when you're 3 years old. I'm serious. Do you actually remember that
Oh, none of
scenario?
it. My mum told me all of it.
Okay, because I was pretty surprised you remembered it in so much detail. I don't think, knowing children and studying developmental psychology, a 3-year-old child does not have a concrete sense of self, let alone a sense of others or others' perspective. So I would really, really doubt your mother's intention, that you have the intention of inflicting pain on anyone else, because a 3-year-old, you're not really aware of the results of your actions, or that you want to kill him. I think
of course.
maybe she was embellishing.
We've all seen little babies swing their arms.
Yeah, but they're
around
not doing it with the
giant-
intention of inflicting being paid like an adult that spanks their kid.
Come on, anyone.
They're not, because
anyone,
they're 3 years old.
anyone that's seen children knows
I've seen
children love
thousands.
a bit of violence.
Yeah, they do violence, but they're not fully developed cognitive adults that understand other people's perspectives and other people's feelings.
So you have to teach them it using various methods.
Which
is
you can use various methods. And you also made the contention that people that overly hit their children or move into the area of abuse of children, that they're a very small minority. And I was wondering what statistics and what research back that up. Like, how do you know that? Is this what you feel, or?
Well, there's loads of research to back it up, but we can find it out in this room right now. How many people in this room? Just think about it. How many people in this room could trust yourself to hit your child in a controlled way, versus how many people think, no, I could not. I would abuse my child. The majority of people in this room would back yourself to use controlled spanking and not abusive spanking. What's different about the majority of this room with the rest of the planet?
Well, it could be. This is not really a science. We didn't take a vote. So, who likes to hit kids? You got no hands on it. Depends on how we phrase it. But I told you in my opening that basically the compliance rate for immediate compliance, there's no effect by hitting your kid. And long term, it increases bad behavior. So you made the point that it's an effective tool if used right. I don't see any effectiveness of it from the research. So I don't see it. Now I can use myself as an example. I grew up a horribly misbehaved kid. All right, I was a real terror. And the more I was hit, the more terrible I became. And I've asked people that were hit and hit as children, how did you feel when you were hit? And the overwhelming majority, one of their first responses is angry. And we're actually making children feel angry when we hit them. Angry people don't want to follow rules. And that's why I believe you get more misbehavior as you hit them more. And you create a distance from them, they don't feel they can connect with you. So I was quite a troubled youth. And I talked about the effects of people go to adulthood when they get older. And I experienced it. I'm not blaming my parents. I mean, I take some responsibility, but I grew up in a home that said spoil the run, or spare the rod and spoil the child. I will bang you after, so it was a regular thing. Yeah, that's my experience. I think it's horrible, but hopefully never ever do it. I would really, really hope I don't do it.
Is there anything you'd like to add back?
Very good.
Just in case anybody didn't hear it the first time, hitting children is wrong.
Thank you.
What I'd like to open this up to the audience then. Can we have a show of hands? How many parents are in the room? Do we have many parents? For anyone that can't see, do keep your language very nice and polite. There is a young lady here as well with us, you know, a child here, there is a mother here. Say hello. Hello, she gave me a very pretty wave if you can't see. Hello. What's your name?
Oh, well, it's a debate.
Hello. Okay, so we do have a little one here. We do have a parent. Any more parents in the room? Okay, so how many educators are in the room? How many people say they work in education? Okay, so does one of you want to start us off? What's your experience in disciplining children?
Can I
Yes,
say something? I also think that hitting children is wrong, but what about this situation that my sister, she has 3 daughters, and then I have seen how my sister has raised them since they were born. Like in at one moment, like the 3 daughters got really crazy. They are out of control. They're running around in the living room and then they kind of hitting each other. Then what else my sister can do? Like shouting out without hitting them. It's that moment could be really dangerous, right? So that when she's not, to be honest with you, she's not as wise as like very few educated parents. She's like normal parents on the street. So she doesn't really know that kind of moment, how to deal with them. And then this is, I think, the average parents. And I think this kind of moment that maybe hitting children is acceptable.
You guys want to fight that?
I can answer.
Yeah, go
This is the mic.
Or maybe my question is any other good ways that can deal with this kind of crazy situation?
For your sister.
3 kids.
Yeah, you know, actually, statistically, parents that have more children are better at it. Are better at disciplining children. Older parents over 30 are better. So, in fact, your sister has 3 children. She's probably better at understanding her kids than single parents are. Or parents with 1 child than single parents. If you want to have a discipline of your children, you need to have a discipline plan. You need to have rules. So they need to be aware of them. So as long as she's making them aware they're not supposed to be running around, that's good. And she needs to, before the situation occurs, she needs to say what's the repercussion, what's going to happen. So it could be if you guys are really crazy and you're running around, then you're not going to get to watch the TV show you're on. So you better behave today. Okay? So there's a repercussion. You're not going to get to play with those toys, or we won't go to the park later. Rather than getting frustrated in the moment, losing a little bit of composure, like getting angry. Like disciplinarians, parents, teachers, whatever, should never get angry at children. That can be a reward for them. They made you angry, they're in control. So she should have a planned approach and tell them what the result will be. And then when that happens, enforce it. And say, you guys don't stop running around, we're not watching the show, we're not going to the park, or whatever the negative consequence of your action is. That would be a good thing to try. But she just has to communicate what's going to happen before the bad behavior happens. Does that help? Does that make sense?
I think that I completely agree with that. Kind of pre-education is important, but also my sister is really busy, and then how can I say that you know, that talking to each children every time like that is like,
as a group, like they should make them all aware of what the rules of the house are, right? And what will happen to all of them if they don't obey. And they'll want to comply to get good things. Another thing parents can do, and teachers, is they can focus on good behaviors. You know, you get more of what you want. So the more of what you mention, the more of what you talk about. So if you always talk about bad behaviors, the kids hear a lot about it. But if you ever think kids are running around, they sit down, you praise them for sitting down, you praise them for being good, you're likely going to get more of that behavior rather than just focusing on anger. So catch the children doing something good as often as possible, and you won't have to catch them doing something wrong. That's my best advice. Yeah.
So what are the alternative methods then? Is there already any methods? Before we go to you guys, anyone else use alternative methods rather than hitting?
If a child is behaving badly, or if they're doing something dangerous and they're small, you can physically pick them up and bring them someplace else. Say stop, explain why you want them to stop, and then if they try to get up again, you can make them sit down again. What Keith said about how giving children advice on what they want to do and catching them doing something good and giving them praise for every good thing they do, that really, really, really works. But if a child is doing something that you do not want them to do, if they're acting like a small child, you are an adult and can in fact stop them doing it. That doesn't mean you need to hit them. If there is a mixed age group of children, you concentrate on the oldest child, and all of them are misbehaving, you concentrate on the oldest child. You try and get that oldest child to be a good example. You constantly praise good behavior, and you don't focus on negative behavior.
So on this side, presumably hitting is the only way. So if the kid's got something wrong, that's all we can do, right?
Come on, stop it. Okay. So, pretty much everything Keith said there about mentioning some alternative strategies. I agree there are other strategies that can be used to help as a team with spanking. You need a lot of methods in your toolkit. So I think if me and Keith raise children together, I think we're going to do a great job. But all the positive stuff is great and it's needed, especially for the minor offences that a child might do, the silly little things, positive, reward systems, great. Use all that. But you need in your arsenal, for those really serious things, you need a method that the child knows absolutely clearly this is wrong. And that is what a spank provides. It's something like you're mentioning. Some parents are busy. Parents are stressed. Parents are busy. They can't always sit down and just talk about rights and wrongs to a 3-year-old. It just has to be classical conditioning. What you did was wrong, very wrong. feel the pain. Okay, pain, that was wrong. I'm not going to do that again. It's classical conditioning, it's proven psychology, it works. Yes, when it's used too much and used for things and in situations for small things and too much, then it becomes bad and abusive. But as a part of your toolkit, to help children learn for the most serious offences, when the child's not safe, when the child is playing with a kitchen knife, you've just got to stop that kid playing with the kitchen knife. You can't sit around chatting, showing them pictures. Look what will happen if you touch the kitchen knife. You have to make them learn straight away that this is wrong.
Okay, guy at the back.
If hinting is such a definitive no, you just said, then why don't we continue using that for adults as well?
What? Why don't we get adults because it's so good with children? That's the logic.
Yeah, but you said it's such a definitive no, then why does that stop at a certain age?
So, children are developing into adults, right? Children are not born. A 1-year-old does not know how to sit in this room and listen to us all. This young lady does at 6. But a 1-year-old doesn't. A 1-year-old cries, a 1-year-old misbehaves, a 1-year-old wheezes everywhere. So, that's an extreme example, but children don't know haven't learned how to behave yet, function. So we're teaching them, and we need a really strong tool to use when that child does the worst things. But adults, hopefully, and most of us in this room have proven it, can behave properly in everyday life.
Yeah, well, I can answer your question. We used to, right? Public flogging, someone's a criminal, take them to the square, beat them, it's great. Everybody clap, threw tomatoes and stuff like that. But we've made that illegal. We're not allowed to beat adults anymore. But hitting kids just didn't make by the wayside. Yeah, we used to do that. And we don't do it anymore because realize that doesn't actually make adults behave any better. So why keep doing it? So we have a justice system that doesn't beat adults. It doesn't work.
Okay, guys, let me put some tricky situation to the motion we have been talking about today. Let's think about the gender issue about this motion. I don't know what's the difference between the Western countries, because in Eastern Asia, especially in China, I can tell you that over 99% of the sons were hit by his father when he was young. I have a very bossy father. He slapped me like 100 times when I was under 20 years old. Okay, when we see a mother was hitting their son, quite right, they're just doing the education job. When we heard a father hitting his son, also right, no problem, but guys, especially for the fourth motion, if you become father one day, are you really gonna do to hit your adorable, lovely daughter when she do something wrong? Especially she was acting like a 17-year-old Avril Lavigne, or 4 years ago like Miley Cyrus.
Let's move that on then. So is it different for the father hitting the son and the father hitting the daughter?
Yeah.
Is aggressive, but
if a father
a
hitting the daughter,
a mother hitting, it's more educational. Is that?
If father hitting the daughter, oh my God, it almost seemed as a crime or DV.
Can I just clarify? Are you saying that boys and girls are fundamentally unequal?
I don't think that's
Hitting the physical attacks are not equal.
not equal.
Yeah. Especially for the Asian countries. Yeah.
Right. Well, my only answer is I don't have any problem with it, because I think that women, girls and boys can both understand equally as well what punishment is, any kind of punishment, and what right and wrong is. So I don't see any real reason to differentiate.
And I would just add, I mean, some of the stuff sounded funny, but actually there is truth in behaviour, because in Western research, boys get hit more than girls by their parents. I think there's something psychological about hitting a boy that is, people feel a bit more comfortable than hitting a daughter. just something psychological about it. And I mean, the Western, you mentioned fathers hit more in Asia. In the Western research anyway, mothers hit a lot more. Which I guess makes sense to me because mothers, especially when their kids are very young, do more of the child raising at home, so it kind of makes sense. But I guess there is gender differences, but from my perspective, they wouldn't come into this motion for me. I would do my best as a father to use the exact same, use the spanking tool for my daughter and son in the exact same ways.
Go on, Karen. Try not to use the mic.
All right, we'll try not to use the mic. You brought up an interesting thing about men hitting their daughters or men hitting their sons and how socially acceptable this is. What's interesting is about the research is that fathers will be much more permissive with their daughters. So when they misbehave, they'll let them get off with it. And it doesn't matter if they're 3 years old or 15 or 16 years old. Fathers are a little bit easier going than the mothers are with their daughters. And statistically, boys experience corporal punishment, physical punishment, much more than daughters, from the mothers and fathers. So I think that's a societal thing. It's not just Asia, it's like in America is where this research is done, it's there as well. What's very interesting is that there's a couple differences. If you actually do physical punishment with daughters, they tend to comply more readily. So you don't have to continue with it or escalate it, whereas sons tend to be more rebellious. So there is a different result, and it's more likely that you'll have to hit your son more than you would have to hit your daughter to get the same result, because boys are more rebellious. It's kind of interesting. So it's a good question. It's a good question. Thank you.
Well, I keep going back and forth, one side to the other, and the core is acceptable. What does it mean to be acceptable? I think hitting children is wrong. I agree with you very, very much. But what does it mean to be acceptable? If you've ever met a child that is completely out of control, that has no parental discipline, as you so accurately described, having the choice, we love to make a world where it should be this way. This is how people should behave. This is what the world would be best like. But this is not the way the world is. If you go up against somebody who is angry and upset, and you're belligerent to them and you upset them, they will hit you. If you learn this lesson as a child, that acting this way may result in you getting your behind kicked, it's an educational lesson for later in life. Still, I think it's wrong, but that teaches you that if you act this way later in life, you will eventually get yourself hurt. It teaches caution.
But it also teaches you that you're bigger than someone, you can kick their ass. Oops, I'm behind.
And I think that's wrong, but that's the way the world is. People who are bigger, people who can use violence, use it and exert it over people who are bigger. And that's wrong. It's the way it is.
If we just think about children, it's not the whole world. Like there's 29 countries that outlaw physical punishment of all children in all situations, whether it's your own home or at school or wherever it is. The first was Sweden. And when they brought in the laws against any physical punishment of children in the 1970s, I forget the year, I think it was 72, over 50% of Swedish people thought, you know, hitting your kids is a good idea in certain situations, like this side of the room. But today, after 45 years of this law, only 10% of Swedish parents believe there's any accepted use of physical punishment. So, in other words, in Sweden it doesn't exist anymore. And I don't see a lot of Swedish people that don't realize they shouldn't confront belligerent people or they might get hit. Like, I don't think anybody missed that lesson in Sweden. And it's not just Sweden, there's many countries where it's illegal. And also I might mention that the UN, 192 countries have ratified it, not the United States, unfortunately. But there's many countries where it's illegal. Germany is an example, Spain's an example. I can't remember all, there's 29 of them. But also the UN declaration is that physical punishment of children is violence, and violence against children is wrong. And through education and through legislation, it should be wiped out of every society in every country.
Okay, so should we move that on then? So why have some countries banned it and some countries not? Did you want to take that on, Brendan?
Take that on? Not really, no. I've got two other great points though. One, I really like the logic of hitting people is bad, so hitting kids is bad. The problem is hitting people bad? I don't think hitting people is necessarily bad. It's not morally evil to hit someone. I will be teaching my kids to absolutely, there's a time and place to hit someone. If someone's bullying you in the schoolyard and you haven't got any other option, you tear his head off. It's what you do. And there's a time and place I will hit someone. So I don't think that's morally bad. That's a moral question. I don't agree with that. Second point is hitting. You said you always hit out of anger. But if you ask our parents, I believe you have a brother, by the way. He did try to kill me.
Good looking one.
If you ask our parents, did you hit me and Liam out of anger? They'll tell you no. We hit them out of love and compassion for their own good. So just you could run with any one of those if you want.
Can I answer that? I'm glad you brought up the point about hitting adults and whether it's bad or not. If anyone here can offer a superior solution to why we have wars and how to avoid them, when people kill you and when people take your land and take your stuff, that's crossing a line, right? And just like in the playground, when you have to deal with a bully or something, I'm not saying you should always be violent. I think there's plenty of other ways, and I agree with most of them. The case I was talking about, at least for younger kids. But there is one thing about children. When children are, I think it's about 3 to 6 or 7 years old, before the character is formed. After that, it's kind of set for life. That's the only real time that I would encourage people to very sparingly teach their children with corporal punishment.
Hitting children is wrong in the same way that torture is wrong. It is something that should not be contemplated under the law. There are some times when when violence can or should be resorted to, when it is the lesser evil, but it is always evil and it is always still wrong. Just because it is better to fight back when someone else is coming after you doesn't mean that you should be the person who initiates aggression. Yeah, that's it.
You're saying it's a necessary evil at some point.
You're debating yourself,
right?
I'm sorry. I have already. You just said that between the ages of 3 and 6, sometimes, perhaps, hitting can be necessary. I have said before that as an adult, if you are dealing with a small child, you are physically capable of controlling them without hitting them. You are physically capable of sitting them down, saying, you can't do that, don't do that, here's why, don't do it again. You are capable of getting them to stop without hitting them. You do not need to hit a child under the age of 6 in order to get them to stop doing something. It's not necessary.
But you did say...
Okay, hold on. I'm going to take a point from the back.
Sorry, what you were just saying that if you're holding a child, like you're physically capable of doing that, if you're doing that to another adult, would you consider that violence? Like when you're holding a child, that is a form of violence.
I'm sorry, I don't think the thing here is that violence is unacceptable. It's that hitting children is unacceptable. I've said previously that if you're comparing a child to an army, maybe you should call the police. There are certainly people who are legally children who are occasion for calling the police. If you need to call the police, you should call the police. They're the people who we have delegated the task of societally approved violence to. If it is humanly possible to do so, you should call them instead of doing it yourself. You should not think of doing violence yourself as a first, second, or third resort. You should call the police first.
Okay, Barry, stay there. So, to bring it down, do you believe, I'm not sure what your answer is, maybe you're not, do you believe that spanking is 100% wrong 100% of the time? Yes or no?
Yes! Yes!
So, all me and Robin have to do in this debate to disprove this principle that 100% of spanking is wrong 100% of the time is give you guys just one example, one piece of context where a parent spanking a child on the bottom is the right thing to do, and we've won the debate.
picture. Look at this picture. Look at this picture here. This man, it looks in the picture, it looks like he's about to spank a child. He's in control of the
son or daughter.
I don't care. I do not care. This man is about to spank a child. The child is in his control. The child is not doing anything. The child can be punished in some way other than hitting them. So you shouldn't hit them. If you are in control and you are thinking about it and you have made a decision to spank and to hit a child, you're in control and you can make a decision to punish them in some other way.
Okay.
And that's what you should do.
So a child has a kitchen knife.
Okay, I got an
And he's
answer.
running at another child. What should he do? Stop him and then sit him down for a chat?
Take the kitchen
Are you going to kick?
Give me that. You can't have that.
I think that if a child is running at another child with a kitchen knife, you have problems that are entirely too large to be handled by any possible benefit of spanking. You should take that knife away. You should try and see by talking to the child if they had any idea what they were about to do. And if they did understand what they were about to do, it is time to talk to a professional psychologist.
You're going to have to get very rich and spend a lot of time raising your children. It's a tough message. What about you, K-Star? Keith, 100% spanking is wrong, 100% of the time. Yes or no? Yes.
I look at spanking or the use of violence to control people's behavior. It's just that you're out of options, you're frustrated. And when we look at the data, who hits their kids and when do they hit their kids, we find out that there's many reasons, many groups that you can pick a big group out of it, but one reason is people that are under stress in their lives, work-related stress, financial stress, okay? And people that feel that they're out of options, they don't know what to do, and then they get out of lack of options. So one way to solve that problem, in your example with the bleach, I don't think a 3-year-old knows that bleach will kill something. So taking the bleach away from you, putting it on a good parent should put that on a high shelf, I think. Putting it on a high shelf and then you have access, say, no, don't touch the bleach, probably wouldn't suffice. But I think parents do it because they don't know what to do. And I think a lot of parents would benefit greatly from taking a 4-month course in childhood development and discipline management strategies. Like, I think our governments and our school systems could do more to educate parents, and then they wouldn't feel that that's the only thing they can do. I think I don't think my parents are bad people at all in any way. I love them, but they hit me and beat me a lot, and I think it's because they just didn't know better. And out of me and my siblings, they were actually quite compliant, and I was quite rebellious. It didn't work for me, and they just had to do it more and more. And I don't think they felt happy when they did that. I think that question to you. I think my parents loved me, but I think they did it out of ignorance, and that's what I'm gonna let them have made that mistake because they didn't know what to do.
Okay, go on. Help me understand something. So, I'm for hitting kids, just putting it out there, but the against side, you're saying that kids aren't fully cognitively formed at that age. I understand that. Of course not. So I'm not a psychologist, but that to me says that they're not really thinking long term or strategically. So if you're saying, okay, in a half hour from now, we're not going to go to the park as your punishment for what's happening in this instant, that doesn't really mesh for me. So how do you?
Well, that would actually work.
It's like me talking about politics to my dog. I need to right away give him the tap on the butt.
No. 3-year-olds can anticipate tomorrow and they can remember yesterday. In fact, that's their whole perception of time. So they do have now, soon, and later. 3-year-old is not as much developed, so it's a little bit harder to do. It has to be more in the moment. I think if they were actually 3-year-olds, maybe going to the park in an hour is not going to work. But having you have to sit in the seat and you have to stay there is going to work. And they've done that in psychological experiments in the 80s when we hit kids in psychological experiments. So they've done those tests and they've shown that that's just as effective. And they call it like the restraint condition. So the kids weren't allowed to leave the seat. And then they have other parents and the kids. And in the moment that worked quite well. So I think that's a good option. But as far as kids not being developed, that's actually very, very important to understand. That they can't operate, think about the world, and do things. Someone mentioned, imagine if you brought your child in here, and they're sitting there and they're crying and they're screaming. It's because they're 2 or 3 years old. They have a 3-minute attention span, and debates aren't that enthralling for them. So sometimes we just got to accept that kids are what they are because of the age they're at, and not expect a 3-year-old to do what a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old can do, because they're very different. They're at very different stages in development, and
There's been
parents forget that.
There's been a lot of attacking of their ideology. So what do you guys think? When is not a good time to hit children? Is it always hitting for discipline, or when is not the moment to hit?
I would put it as the last resort. You should try everything else first, because diminished returns and all the research. I agree with most of the research on the general implications of it, that generally smacking has bad long-term effects, especially with frequency. That's the main study, frequency and less often severity. But as a last resort, when it's used very sparingly, it makes the biggest impression, and you of course hurt your child the least amount possible.
Yeah, you had your hand up.
So they have given a lot of alternatives to hitting children, like letting them sit in the chair, and your only way of proving that hitting children is a better option
is by saying that hitting children can give them a psychological link between pain and bad actions. How long a period of time do you hope this psychological link can last? Until they become a reasonable individual or for their lifetime?
Yeah, lifetime. Especially with an explanation, it lasts for a lifetime.
Yeah, but then you're comparing the law of nature to the psychological link between hitting children and their misdemeanors. But then there's a difference between this analogy, because the law of nature is always there, but for their lifetime, after they become reasonable individuals, the children do realize that their parents are not the most authoritative person in the world. So when their logic cannot overthrow the psychological link that they felt between pain and hitting children, pain and this misdemeanor.
That's a good question. I can't offer a small answer on it, but Solomon once said, if you raise a child the way you should go, they'll always walk in it. And that's generally what we see. Our character is molded by the age, from the young age to about 7 years old or so, I think.
Is it actually?
At least there's some studies to add evidence to that.
It still changes.
Yeah, it still changes, but a vast majority, or rather a key core, right? We can agree on that. Sure.
Okay.
Anyway, if you train the child young, they'll keep it forever. It's just like when you touch a fire and it's too hot. You don't have to touch it again to remember. You'll always remember. It's such an instant impression, it's so strong that it's etched into your memory. Right? That's the power of memory. I mean, the deepest impressions of memory make the strongest recall and retention.
I'd like to bring up, because we're talking about punishment and long-term results. The research says it doesn't work. In the long term, you have less compliance, you have less internalization of moral attitudes and acting in good ways when you discipline your children physically than you do when you explain things to them and explain what are good actions and why they're good, and what are bad actions and why they're bad.
You can explain
You can do that too.
whilst you're hitting.
But the hitting actually interferes with that message. And you got to ask yourself in all these situations, discipline, punishment situation, is what are children learning? So I want everybody here grew up, and we were all children. And nobody in this room, I'm gonna guess here, nobody in this room has killed anyone, have they? Right? Put up your hand. But nobody says killed anyone.
No one's ever gonna say.
No one's killed anyone. Because it's not because we get punished for it. Think of our society as adults. If we kill someone, we'll go to jail for life or we'll be killed. But that's not why we don't kill people. We don't kill people because it's a wrong thing to do. We have internalized some moral understanding about humanity, how to get along socially. And when you discipline kids through hitting them, you're actually teaching them more of a lesson about hitting than you are about internalizing morals and accepting and behaving yourself in society for the good of society. We don't kill each other, not because we'd be punished for it, but because it's wrong, right? I'm not afraid being punished for it.
So I'm from North London. I went to a Catholic school. So a lot of my peers were Irish, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Indian, and we all we all were disciplined in some form of hitting. So some of us got the belt, some of us got the wooden spoon. Me personally, my mum called it pow pow, and then she would hit me, not too hard. And I can think of many occasions. She started about 6. When I got to 8, perhaps we'll be eating dinner, and then she'll say, "Felipe, can you put your dishes away and clean your room?" And for a split second, I would think of talking back to her. And I'd look at her face, and in my head, all I could hear was pow pow. And this is when I'm old. It's when she stopped hitting me. So this, I knew what to expect. I love and I absolutely respect my mother to bits, but I know there's a line, and that line can't be crossed. And I would politely do what I was meant to do. And I'm sure if I rang up any of my mates, there would be complete agreement that this was formed as a basis of receiving discipline, and that means from an early age. I just don't think you've come up with a good alternative from a young age so far. If my mum turned around to me and said, "All right, you can't watch your favourite TV show," I'd be like, "All right." Like, well, what else do you have on offer?
Yeah, go on. Is it ethically viable to be mentally retarded people or senile people to force rules? They also don't have mental capacity to use reason and logic to follow their own lesson. Does that make sense?
So is it reasonably central to hit mentally ill people because they can't process it?
Oh, I see the point. So, philosophically, if you could hit children because they're not developed enough to know better, therefore, with that principle, is it also fair to hit people that have mental illnesses because they an interesting point. I guess I haven't thought about that before. My answer probably would be instinctively is we have better solutions, right? We have homes. Definitely use physical force. Like my uncle's autistic, so he needs to be not violent, but he needs to be sometimes calmed down physically, forced, and taken from A to B. So definitely use physical force. I don't think you probably don't need to hit them. I'm no expert on that, but physical force, yes. Probably not. But it's an interesting point because it's a similar answer.
I have some challenges for all over the sides, but to answer your question, to compare a child to a mentally disabled adult is just not fair. There's the expectation that an adult is self-sustaining, an adult can take care of themselves, and that's not the expectation for a child. So they're fundamentally different, and the comparison just doesn't fit in this example. Anyway, I have contention for both, but since we're on the topic of what it teaches children, great, it teaches you don't do that bad thing, but it also teaches you that whatever I tell you to do is the right thing to do. It teaches you that authority is correct. Look around the world. Don't challenge your own culture. That's really tough for people to do. Look for a law somewhere in the world that you think is an awful law. That, oh my God, people do this and this causes suffering. Well, just think. Beating children teaches them that the person who beats you is right. Whatever they tell you to do is right. Oh, I was doing it wrong this time, so if they beat me the next time, well, that must also be wrong. What can't you teach with corporal punishment? Great. According to your argument, you can teach, don't force your brother to drink bleach. All right, let's assume that's true. But then what else? What can't you teach with that? That's the primary motivation between warlords in sub-Saharan Africa teaching children to kill their families. Well, if you don't do this, you'll get beaten. Oh, well, this must be the right thing to do. You can teach anything with it because it enforces that authority is always correct.
My response to that is, you're focusing on the tool, you're blaming the tool. I blame the delivery of the tool, the usage of the tool. So spanking, so when my mum spanks me with a wooden spoon, if she just got the wooden spoon and said, "Liam, you're wrong, I'm right, spank," then that backs up what you're saying, because she is saying, "I'm doing this because I'm right and you're wrong." If she explains to me why trying to help my brother is wrong, and why that is a bad thing, and then it hits me, then I associate the negative behaviour with the actual, I'm actually learning from it. And this is the same with all behaviour management. If you send a child to say, "Go to your room," without an explanation, that is also very, very damaging for the child because they don't understand it. It's a bad delivery. And if you say to a child, if you say, I'm just going, this is one of the, neglect is worse than spanking in my mind. You know, I'll just sit in front of the TV, just play games and stop annoying me because I can't discipline you. That is neglect, and that is having a bad impact. And there is no explanation in that, there's no learning of that. So the learning comes with the usage of the tool, not the tool itself.
You're absolutely right that it's not one or the other, it is both. You're teaching, yeah, don't do this one thing, use pain as an aversion. But you're also teaching that this is the person who hits, this is the person who can spank, and by extension, this is the person who can sentence you to death. And you're teaching that that is morally right. Both at the same time.
I wonder whether it's less about hitting kids and it's more about pain. And what's an acceptable level of pain? So is there a sliding scale of tap versus a grab or a slap? You know, if I think of my childhood, there would be varying degrees of pain involved based on different types of behaviour. So if you're sitting at a table with adults and adults are talking, your mother would grab you under the table and squeeze you in the ankle down. Or to the other extreme, if you had a fight with another kid, maybe you won't get the pain involved in that from your parents. Usually for me it was around respect. If you just respected someone of authority, a grandparent or a teacher or something like that, that was sort of, it was more pain inflicted than that. So I'm kind of thinking back to my own experience, if it's more about the degree of pain inflicted versus the frequency of shit.
Yeah, does anyone want to take that up? To do with the pain that's involved. You've got a big question.
It's a very good question. Keith brought it up earlier, and there's no cookie cutter approach to raising children. People try, but parents always have problems. They've got to go get a second, third opinion, and sometimes problems persist. And if there was a cookie cutter approach, you'd be able to inflict just that amount of pain, and it would be good every time. But there is, it's different with boys and girls, pain tolerance, and
is that the
ages,
like parents have lost their way, that they don't know how to manage behaviour through different types of pain. You know, they're like, all hitting is bad, so that is as bad as slapping. You know, they're just like so freaked out.
Maybe out with
PC.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, common sense has to play a part. I mean, if you don't feel bad when you punish your children in any punishment, I think there's something kind of wrong with you, right? You should have a moral desire to do it, but you shouldn't want to do it. So when it comes to the acceptable levels, I think a safe boundary is anything that doesn't, really scar mentally or physically. And that's the kind of, I mean, there's a lot in there, but I would generally, side on the merciful side rather than the severity.
Well, I think it's because parents don't get taught anymore. You know, like when I remember when I was a kid, my grandma would look in the background saying, "That kid needs a good flogging." And my mum, "You're right. What's a good flogging? What?" So there was sort of like this teaching going on in society of what was an acceptable level of pain. No one talks about it anymore. It's like you just want to hit your child.
Yeah.
So parents are totally scared to even touch their kids. Because no one teaches degrees of discipline.
I want to respond. Like, pain is subjective. You can't really judge the pain you inflict upon anyone else. Like, if I hit Barry that hard or I hit that hard, I don't really know what's the level of his pain. It's impossible. So, it'd be really hard for parents to know it. You don't know it, though. You don't know it. You don't know how they feel. You can't, because we're physically separate beings.
You also can't just mental, right?
Secondly, when it comes to very young kids, I want you to be aware that we as adults are quite a bit stronger than kids. It's very, very easy to hurt them when we don't mean to. And that's why I would never want to hit a very young child, because I'd be afraid I'd hit them too hard. So I'd be worried about that. But when you're dealing with a child and you're hitting them, you don't know how they feel. And then you say, what's acceptable? And there's no cookie cutter approach, and it's hard, and you don't learn from your ancestors or people behind you. But the thing is you have a society that says, let's say Parents can hit their kids. Teachers can hit your kids. And any adult on the street can hit your kid. Is that cool?
That's a new motion.
Because we're all adults, and we all have that ability to control kids through pain. At one point in a lot of our histories, that was exactly the approach. So that's been narrowed down. You probably wouldn't feel comfortable even if you spank your own child having me do it, because I feel like doing it. That would probably upset you.
Yeah.
But at one time it wouldn't. That'd be totally acceptable.
But at one point we kept adults as well, right?
So when it comes to pain and what we're doing, what research shows us is one, it doesn't work. So we can forget everybody, what we've learned from our ancestors and what people have told. It doesn't work. If science says it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. It's not liberal society or some left-wing movement. It's been proven over and over again. It doesn't work. Secondly, when you use physical punishment on a child, if they do not comply, what usually happens is you increase the severity. So you do it harder. And you run into the area of child abuse. So I want to tell a little story about my mom and a mistake she made. I want to call it mistake. I was being very naughty and she used to beat me with a wooden spoon when I was naughty. And I kept being naughty. I was about 8 years old. And I was pushing and I was whipping away from her and she was trying to hit me in the ass with a wooden spoon. And I fell down on the floor and she hit me square across the face. All right? And she blackened my eye and semi-broke my nose. And the next day, I had to go in for an eye exam. And my mom was petrified that I would tell the eye doctor that she hit me in the face with a wooden spoon. She was petrified. And I told her I wouldn't do that. What happened is her discipline. She didn't want to blacken my face before an eye exam. That's illegal. She would probably lose me as her son. So, but it escalated. It went out of control, and she lost it. She didn't aim very well. That's a danger of using physical punishment. You're not always in control yourself. The pain threshold can go way through the roof, and you can end up with your 8 or 9-year-old son with a blackened face, and you will feel, I'm sure my mom felt horrible, but I was a very good son, and I told the guy that I was in a fight at school, because I was actually in quite a few fights at school, because I was a very poorly behaved child, and I told him it happened at school, and my mom was so relieved. But part of my mind, I was thinking, I'll get you back. But anyway, it was my mom.
Hold on. We've got about 10 minutes left, guys. I just want to get it in your heads, and we're going to need somebody from the audience for a closing statement. Okay, so start thinking about whether you want that to be you and what you might say. You'll have 2 minutes. Okay, just get in your head. We've got about 10 minutes left. I just want to move on to an area of, we touched upon it there briefly, the relationship between the child and the parent, whether they're hitting or not. Is it improved by there being hitting involved in the relationship or not? Is there more trust? Is there anger? Who would like to approach that subject? Let's have the audience first.
I mean, there are parents who say they love their children and act like they don't. I'm not the one to question that. If you say you love your child, I take it at face value. But my question is, when a parent acts in true belief that they're doing what is right for their child, is it acceptable to fine them, make them pay money? Is it acceptable to put them in jail? Is it acceptable to hurt them for doing what they truly believe is helping their child? And my challenge to this side of the argument is Liam's mother a criminal? Is Liam's mother, who did what she did, believing that it was right and having her son grow up to believe that was true? Should she be put in jail? Should she be forced to give up her sons? Is that kind of punishment acceptable as a loving parent? That's my challenge to this side of the argument.
I think that the question of whether something is moral and something is criminal are 2 completely different questions, and we should try not to mix them up. I think that given that Liam's mother committed no crime at the point when she slapped him, there is no reason even to be having the discussion on whether she could be put in prison. It is part of almost every system of law that you cannot punish someone for something that was not a crime when they did it. I think that if it is the law of the land that you cannot hit your children, and that it is well publicized and people know you can't do that, it's illegal, and then they do it, yeah, you should punish them. There may be times and places when it is less wrong to do something that is wrong, but we
let a certain amount of police discretion and prosecutorial discretion in order to deal with those gray areas. We do not say, oh, you know what, actually this thing that's illegal all of the time, we're going to make it not illegal just for you. We leave it up to police discretion and prosecutorial discretion. No, Liam's mother should not go to prison for doing something that was perfectly legal at the time, because it wasn't illegal. Right. What she did was wrong, but I understand why she did it, but you know what? She shouldn't have done it, and it was unnecessary. I just want to hammer this over and over again. It is not necessary to hit children in order to discourage behavior.
Okay, let's go.
Can I respond to that? Direct response to my own comment. It was it's that you're saying it was in the past, laws were different, it shouldn't be prosecuted. But what you're saying is that acceptable means prosecution. If something is not acceptable, we don't allow it to continue. We don't sit and say, oh no, well that's not good, and do nothing. We challenge it, we act against it. If we choose not to act against it, if we take that scenario and put it in today's society, with laws that say you go to jail, if we choose, if we don't send that person to jail, we don't act against them, we don't fine them, we don't imprison them, we don't threaten to hurt them, then we accept it. It is acceptable.
Okay, go on.
We are talking about prison and jail. I just want to point out, there is no jail and prison for the child, especially for under 10 years. Is there any in the world? No, because generally it's the parents' responsibility to discipline the child, not the government. Do you agree with that? So, there is crime for the adults, and the children are not born angels. So, if the children have some very, very bad behavior, for example, this kid is beating very hard a younger kid, and other kind of behavior, if it happens for adults, it may be criminal. You may send him or her to prison. For such kind of activity, you need some kind of way to discipline this child. Do you agree with that? And I think hitting your child is a very good way. Maybe I use the word not very correctly. It's a dangerous way, but I think it's a necessary way to discipline the child, especially for those their behavior is too dangerous. There may be a sign of crime in the future. I think hitting the child is acceptable. That's all my message.
Guys, I got another very crazy idea. I want to ask the audience, especially for the ladies, do you think, okay, this picture gave us an illumination is that when the parents are parenting their children, they are parenting their very young children, maybe under 10 years old. Let's think about the teenagers from 12 to 17 years old, maybe, okay. Compared to girls, teenager boys are way easier to do or get influenced by bad things or unhealthy things. So, what you gotta do if your teenager boys are doing bad things, really bad things. The bright side could be cheating, adultery, promiscuity, calling prostitutes for services, or the really bad things could be maybe your 15-year-old boy could be start robbing, dealing drugs, or get influenced by radical Islam.
Okay, so
could we getting them?
I want to respond like as far as people going to jail, people don't go to jail for spanking their kids in those chaotic countries where it's illegal to spank their kids. They go to education programs. Governments realize separating families is not really the best in the child, usually in the child's interest. Like Liam's mom, he lost her. It wouldn't be good for Liam. But if parents are like beating kids with sticks and giving them black eyes and breaking their arms and legs, those parents do go to jail. Like there is a limit. For your example, should parents be responsible for their own kids' behavior? You had a couple questions. I want to say, yeah, they should be, but the state should, you said under 10 years old, the state should also take responsibility in educating parents. So in countries where it's illegal to beat your children, the states do educate parents, and maybe they can do a better job. So that's part of it. The state does have responsibility, but they also have a responsibility to protect children, the human rights of the child. A child should be able to live free from fear and free from physical abuse. And I'm sure there's examples in everybody's country, not just China, not just America, but all over the world where people have abused their children, and those people aren't criminals. And I don't know what Chinese law is, but they should be here. And your example about a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old, and you're actually using crime. And these are state offenses. And I don't know how it works in China, but in other countries you have a Juvenile Offenders Act, and they go to prison. And as a parent, you should have done a better job maybe when they were 5 years old and 10 years old, and teach them how to be socially responsible adults, how to get along with them in society rather than robbing them or killing them or whatever they're dealing with drugs, and they wouldn't be doing it at that point. I think it's too late, and if they get in trouble, the government, the police, they're going to be the ones handling it, unfortunately.
Okay, kids, what about
That's the
likewise?
result.
If your 16-year-old son getting sex addict?
Getting what?
Get a sex addict.
Well, I give sex addict.
Doesn't really,
I don't know if that's a bad thing when you're 16.
You still have the responsibility to tell him, okay, my son, too much sex are harmful for your body.
So what level, we should start on there, so what level does it become the parent's responsibility to be disciplined and then become the government's level to discipline? Or what stage does it move between the two?
I guess adulthood is the ultimate end of a parent's responsibility, right? Teenage, you don't really hit teenagers because it doesn't work, right? When I was like, my mum gave up hitting me and my brother because the wooden spoon kept breaking every time she hit us. We were just too big, right? It didn't really hurt anything. But what I want to piece together, there was some really interesting points that you made and Keith's personal story about spanking being used badly. So the enemy with child discipline is not spanking, it's anger. It's uncontrolled reaction from parents to children. That is the enemy. We can all agree that's a big part of the enemy, right? It's anger, uncontrolled reactions from parents, whether they're hitting, whether they're telling their child to go over there and not explaining why, whether they're neglecting their child, whatever. It's anger. Parents not being able to control their emotions is the enemy of child discipline, not spanking. Spanking is simply a tool that when used in a controlled way is a very effective tool. And the majority of parents, like all of us in this room, can use spanking in a controlled way. And if you want to live in a society, if you want to get parents better at spanking, you want them to learn and help Keith's mum solve her problems, you don't say as a society it's illegal, it's unacceptable, because then Keith's mum doesn't talk to anyone about it. It's unacceptable. She'll get, like you said, she'll get thrown to prison just for saying it. If it's acceptable in society and legally, then Keith's mum can get help. Like Alcoholics Anonymous has helped millions of alcoholics. So Keith's mum can go and get help in like a Spanking Anonymous group or whatever. And society can progress.
Okay, I'm going to be a point there, but we will go. So do you want to educate how to use spanking? And you guys spoke about education before, about educating parents. How would you guys educate parents that are currently spanking?
How to do? Well, I mean, I studied child psychology. I studied discipline, classroom management. I teach that. I think we give classes for mothers before they have children, before they get pregnant. They have classes on how to take care of the kids and stuff. Those things could be made available as the child. Those things could be made available as the children grow up. Effort could be put into it, and I think it should be, because the problem I have with spanking is you can't control everybody's spanking. You say don't do it out of anger, but you can't control what everybody does with it. But you can make bad at it, and then nobody does it, you don't have to worry about it. And the outcome can be very, very negative. And we talked earlier about learning and what your children learn. It's a very important question. What are you teaching your kids? I think if you're from Sweden, is anybody from Sweden? Or Germany, or Spain, or Norway, or Finland? Anyone? Because, no one. Because spanking is illegal in those countries. And it'd be very interesting to hear someone from a country where it's illegal talk about how kids are raised and how they learn to behave without being hit. I can't tell you that because I was hit a lot. So I didn't experience that. I wish they were here. Here was in the society where you're allowed to be hit. Right?
Okay, well, we'll leave it there because we're now time. We're now going to do our closing statement. Okay, so I need 2 brave volunteers from the audience. We'll start off. Who would like to do a 2-minute closing statement for the 4 sides? Hands up. Who would like to go? Come on, guys, don't be shy. We've got some confident people out there. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to both of these guys again. They've been talking far too much. I'd rather hear one of you guys. Alright, we did get one. Yeah, we got another balance. Okay, you can go for the 4 sides. Who would like to talk for the against side from the audience? Come on, guys.
It's a shy audience this time.
It's very quiet. We're not going to hit you.
Oh, was that hand up?
Yeah, we're not going to hit you. I didn't bring my wooden spoon.
Okay, you guys will both get the talk. Okay, so, who went first? The 4 side went first last time, so the against side can start. Which one of you would like to go first and the closing statements?
If you want to discipline children, you do not want to do it as a bit of thought here, a bit of thought there, a bit of action here, a bit of action there. You need to do it as a system, as an idea that you have in your head, as a way of being. Because people are people are creatures of habit. Children are creatures of habit. You are a creature of habit. So, every day, in every way, you try and get the child to act in the way that you want it to. You reinforce good behaviors. You praise them for good behaviors. You say nice things. You make sure that there are good consequences to good actions and that there are bad consequences to bad actions. In none of this is hitting children necessary. What you want when you are raising a child is to influence how they act, how they think. When they are very small, we're mostly influencing how they act. And as they grow older, you will also influence how they think. If you tell them that hitting people is wrong, except when I do it when you did something bad, this is confusing. This is, there's a distance between your actions and your words. It's much, much easier to teach children, don't hit people, hitting is wrong, you don't hit them. It's easier to get children to behave well if you are consistent, if you're always telling them this is how you act, and if you're rewarding them for acting in that way. That is what you want to do. That is how you want to discipline your child. You want them to understand that there is a right way to act and a wrong way to act, and to give them every opportunity to do it. You do not need to hate your child to do that. Children are people. Hitting people is wrong. Hitting children is wrong.
Thank you, Barry. Okay. Come on down. And reminder everyone to stay quiet while the closing statement's going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I am the younger brother of Leo. So he tried to kill me when I was younger, but I made him harm. And today I'm supporting him. So, I've been practicing Muay Thai for a year and self-defense classes for 6 months. Why do I don't even tell, I'm working out quite a bit. Why do I do this? Because I know there's a chance that someone might threaten my life or my family's life, and I want to be ready to protect myself. I want to be ready to use violence to hurt people. That's the truth. So violence, hitting people, is not wrong. There's a time and a place for everything. So hitting other adults is not morally wrong. Hitting children is therefore not morally wrong. Crush his logic. The second point I want to make is this argument actually isn't acceptable. It doesn't really matter if it's acceptable to me or Barry. What really matters is it acceptable to you? This is a very personal argument. Is it acceptable to you? That's the question. And to be honest, I think Barry's red shorts aren't very acceptable in a formal argument like this. But that's my opinion. And he finds them acceptable. That's fine. We both are about understanding what's acceptable. But I have no right to tell Barry he shouldn't wear those red shorts. Just like Barry has no right to tell me I can't hit my children. So it's your choice whether you hit your children. And what I always say, what I preach, actually I don't preach. What I say is, experience is king. I might not hit my children, I don't know. I'll just listen to the wife probably. But it's about, I want to try it. You should try everything. Try it, if it works, go with it.
I'll just talk, because that's echoey as hell. I've said a lot, most of all of what I really wanted to say coming here. I didn't realize we built up the close. But I think the main thing we should take away is hitting is not necessary. There's other things we can do, and if we don't know what those things are, we should try to learn about them. I would recommend if anybody has questions of what they should do with their children, that they talk to a child care professional, or they talk to a psychologist for young children, and ask them their advice, or they read some books and they go and educate themselves. Please don't simply do what your parents did to you. There's better answers out there. They may be not easy to find, and it may be a lot of work to enforce it. But there are better things to do than hitting children. I think the long-term negative effects of it are too great, and they outweigh any positive side effect that there may be. So I think the danger is too great long-term. Yeah, I don't have a lot more. How much more time do I have? A minute. We got another minute. I wanted to mention about my own parents. I love them very dearly. They didn't hit me because they're bad parents. I don't think they're bad parents. All right. And my mom's going to watch this on YouTube. I love you, Mom. You're a great mom. I never tell those stories to people. I don't like to think about it. It's not the best part of my childhood, but I just think my parents needed more education. I think they could have handled it better. And it worked better for my older brother than for me, because he was a very well-behaved older brother. He didn't happen to him so much, different personality. So I just think for my own self, I wish my parents hadn't done it. I don't blame them for it. And growing up to start my own family, I hope I can find solutions that don't involve them. I really hope that for myself, because I think that's the best solution. So thanks for listening. Thank you.
And which one of you would like to go? Okay, to conclude, and to answer some previous points, not all the science is anti-slave. There is science that shows positive effects of spanking. Unsurprisingly, it's always the infrequent spanking, and some of it is community-based. A couple of names, Robert Lazzaro and Marjorie Gunnow. I encourage you to look it up, it's very interesting. And maybe I can share one of my own experiences. Just before that, there is a prominent child psychologist, Tracy Dennis, who is definitively anti-spank. But she talks about anger like it's the real problem. To reiterate Liam's point, timeouts given in anger lose their usefulness. So it's really anger that's the main problem, not spanking. And as for my own experience, when I was younger, not too young, I think it was about 5 or 6, I had done something particularly egregious, bad, and my dad led me to the garage, which was historically where I received the worst punishments. To be clear, I think my dad spanked me about 4 or 5 times in my entire life, okay? But anyway, here's the experience. I was taken to the garage, my dad held a switch in his hand, and he said, "Son, this is extremely serious. I have to punish you for this, and I thought he was going to hit me. I was trembling. I knew what had come before, so I expected it. Then my dad said to me, here's the switch, I'll take the punishment. And he made me hit him. And what that did is it removes every notion of dictatorial power. It removes every, inkling of feeling that my dad wants to hurt me. He wants me to learn that doing bad things hurts people in love. And if I hadn't been spanked, I wouldn't have appreciated this flip around. Right?
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, that concludes our hitting your children is acceptable big debate. Now, big moment again. Everybody, get out your mobile phones. You're going to be used to being space now, so my name's space on your WeChat. Don't look at all those other messages you get during the debate. Go straight to the space, and you need to vote again. Are you for? Are you against? Or are you undecided about the motion? Are you for? Are you against? Or are you undecided? Hitting your children is acceptable. Okay. Send those now. We're going to have around about a 5-minute break. It will allow us to count up the votes, and then come back. Liam will give a few big debates announcements, and then we'll give you the results. And Brendan, all of you are here in the bar.